Thank you guys for coming. This is obviously a very special day for the Mountaineer basketball program and West Virginia University athletics history, so we appreciate you coming out. Here today to honor one of the all-time greats in the game of basketball, a guy who's made a tremendous impact on the game. He's a member of the WVU Sports Hall of Fame. He's a member of the Mountaineer Legends Society, member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, so a career full of accomplishments. And today will become the third Mountaineer basketball player to have his number retired and hang in the rafters of the Coliseum. So with that, we'll bring up Mr. Rod Thorn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Just would like to say that I'm tremendously humbled by this. It's a great day for the Thorn family, and I'm looking forward to not only the halftime, but also to a Mountaineer victory today. And it's just, you think back to when you matriculated here many years ago, and you never anticipate or never even think about a day like this happening, but it has, and just very appreciative and very thankful. Questions?
Rod, what does it mean to you personally?
It's, I've been fortunate to have a lot of honors over the course of my adult life, and this is right there, to be honored by your school, to be honored, in the state that you grew up, is a tremendous thing, and I am, as I said, very appreciative of this.
I'm sure there's a lot of memories, nostalgia about your time here coming back this week, but I'm wondering, are there any games or moments from your playing career here that stick out when you think back?
I was thinking about that on the way up here. My wife and I came up from Florida, where we live now, and I was thinking just about that. And there are certain games. My junior year, my sophomore year, we lost in the Southern Conference tournament in the semifinal game, and West Virginia had not lost in that tournament for a long time. So we ended up winning my junior year, and we beat, I want to say, Virginia Tech in the finals. And I remember that game because it was we got to win this game. It was one of those type things. Games tend to run together, when you think back on them. What I really remember here are the people, the fans who were fantastic, the coaches, the players I played with, the trainers, the people you dealt with on a day in and day out basis. I tend to think more about that than any, specific games. You're going to have really good games not so good. We had good teams when I was here, and but it was the people.
Rod, I'm curious. You were part of a run of really good West Virginia players at that time. Not just that came to West Virginia, but went to other places. I think of Howard Hurt, Duke, Chris Smith. I think half of Virginia Tech's team was West Virginia guys. Why was West Virginia so good back then, in your opinion, with basketball players?
That's, I always tell Chris Smith, had he come to West Virginia, they probably would have won 2 national championships. He was a terrific player.
Right.
Dean Blake and Chris Smith both went to Virginia Tech. That's a good question. Hundley was a senior when Wes was a freshman. Wes was a senior when I was a freshman. And then the year after I left, Fritz Williams, came along. So there were some really good players at that time. And as you said, some others that went to other schools.
Hal Greer, Marshall.
Hal Greer, one of the great players of all time. Fantastic player. I don't know.
Special
You know,
time, of
it,
course. Yeah.
West basketball's been huge in West Virginia for many, many years, but there was some, certainly led by West. There were some pretty good players during that time.
Besides the
Yeah.
talent, you played for 4 years in the backcourt with a fellow named Jim McCormick
Yeah.
from Martinsville. What reflection, of course, Jim's not with us any longer, what reflections do you have on Jim McCormick? He was your backcourt running mate for 4 straight years.
Well, he was a terrific player, number one. He ended up being drafted in the 3rd round by Cincinnati. Had he been drafted by another team, Cincinnati, had 4 or 5 guards at that time. I think he definitely would have been a pro player. It was great playing with him. He could handle the ball. He could shoot the ball. Just a terrific player and a great guy. Enjoyed playing with him.
Besides the talent you had on those teams?
I'm sorry?
I said, beside the talent that you had on the teams here, what made the field house such a tough place to play?
Well, number one, the configuration. When you were taking the ball out of bounds, you were in the crowd, except on the ends, where players sat. And it was very intimidating. I don't recall exactly how many fans it's the old place seated, but it was an incredible home court advantage. It really was. West Virginia over a 15, 20-year period lost very few games here, and it was impossible not to get up. If you were having an off game and the crowd wouldn't let you, stay having an off game, it just inspired you. That's another thing I remember is how great those crowds were. And when you ran on the court and they rolled the rug out, it was very inspiring.
Rod, sort of going along the lines of what John was saying about the lineage of players back from the state in that time, Rod often said later in his years that if he'd had the chance to play with Jerry, at least for 1 year, that they would have won a national championship. If you would have had a chance to play with Jerry, your freshman year, how do you think that would have gone?
I often wondered about that. We had a really good freshman team, and we practiced against the varsity a lot in preseason. At that time, it would have been great. They went to Jerry's junior year. I think they went to the final game and ended up losing, and then they got upset the next year. But it would have been great. It really would have been. Who knows what we would have done, but I thought it would have been great.
It just seems weird that you guys were all 4 years.
It does. I think it's
earlier or sooner.
Yeah, it does seem weird, doesn't it?
Any words about Coach Schaus?
Well, I was recruited by Coach Schaus, and he was an imposing figure. A little gruff, but a very imposing figure. And, he left when Jerry left. So I didn't get to play for him. I played for Coach King, who was a very good coach. But Coach Schaus demanded respect. He's a big guy to start out with, and you didn't fool around with him. He was a great one.
I don't know if you are aware, you may be aware of this, but Fred Schaus told me once that he almost had John Havlicek, which would have been right in that time period with you. Were you aware of that? Did you know that he was that close to getting John Havlicek? Who played for Bobby Carroll, who was Fred's teammate in high school, or college.
I did not know that, but I wish he had gotten it. We played in the L.A. Classic, I think was the name of it, when Havlicek played with Jerry Lucas and those guys. We didn't play them, but we played there. Havlicek was one of the great players ever in pro ball. And I can recall guarding him, and the guy never stopped. He ran you off screen after screen after screen, but he never stopped. It was, like if you tried to cover him for about 6 minutes, you were exhausted. He never stopped. He had an incredible motor, and had he come here, that would have been a pretty good team too.
You guys pressed and ran, that would have fit perfectly.
Oh, it would have fit perfectly with him, and he would have fit right in. He would have been great.
I recall once that you guys ran on just about everything, whether it was an inbounds play, everything. Well, describe that style. I've heard it once. It's kind of motion offense before motion offense. Is that?
That's exactly what it was. It was a motion offense before motion. You passed and cut away, set a screen. But the ball, you depended on ball movement, and you depended on people moving. You couldn't stand around, and it was great. Because there were a lot of shots in games. Players loved it. We were getting up shots about every 20 seconds.
Your team scored.
In those days, we scored a lot, and but you're right. He didn't call it a motion offense, but that's what it really was what you would call a modern day motion offense. It was great.
That's why they put the 24-second shot clock in to slow you guys down.
That would have slowed us down, that's for sure.
I got to ask you about your best game. I think you scored 44 in a consolation game.
No, it wasn't a consolation
Well,
game.
NCAA tournament.
We lost that game to go into a consolation.
Okay. Well, it wasn't the game that you had the career high when George held the ball. There was a stall, and you could have had.
No, that was the consolation game.
Okay.
No, the first game we played St. Joe, and I was pretty hot that game, so scored a lot of points. But we ended up losing a game we probably should have won. And then the second game we played NYU that had Happy Hairston and Barry Kramer, who were very good players. And with about 10 minutes left in the game, we were up 10 or 12 points, and we went into a stall. And it was like, the players were saying, like, what are we doing? This game is a consolation game. But we went into a stall. I would have probably had another 45 or 50 in that game.
Ron, what goes to the mind of a 17, 18-year-old kid, I'm guessing, which is what you were at the time, when the legislature declares you a natural resource? You're a young kid at that time, and that happens, and never happened before. I'm just kind of wondering what that moment was like for you at that time.
I was so young and naive at 16, 17, 18 years old that I didn't really think a lot about it. It was like, what? To me, but I know my mother was talked about it, and she was a big proponent of me going to West Virginia, and she liked it. But I didn't really think about it, to tell you the truth.
You were also thinking about Duke. I mean, did that?
That my final choice was West Virginia or Duke, and Howard Hurt was at Duke at the time, and what I remember is they came to visit me, and they bought a doctor. I was in pre-med when I, initially matriculated here, and they bought a doctor named DeBakey to visit, who was a famous heart surgeon at the time, which impressed me.
Did Dick Grote have anything to do with your thinking at that time?
Well, he was a tremendous player, both basketball and baseball, but he didn't have any influence, one way or the other, but he was a great, great player.
What did your dad mean to your athletic career?
I'm sorry.
What'd your dad mean to your athletic career?
My father, everything. My father was a baseball player, and he trained me from a very young. He was throwing curveballs to me when I was 6 years old, and he wanted me to be a baseball player. He had to go to war, Second World War, and got shot on Iwo Jima, and that effectively ended his baseball career. So he wanted me to be a baseball player, and but he also would rent the gym in the winter. He didn't know anything about basketball, but he'd rent the gym to get kids off the street, probably more than anything else, and we would play basketball. And so I played on an organized team when I was 5 years old. And the only reason I was on it was because my dad was a coach. I think I scored 2 points the whole year. But he gave, when you talk about kids, the best thing you can do for a kid, to me, is give them time. And my father always gave myself and the other kids in our neighborhood time. Gave us opportunity. And so I think anything that's transpired for me athletically, I trace back to him.
I assume you are wearing your Hall of Fame ring?
That is it, yeah.
What does that mean to you now that you've got it, and the idea of going in for so many different things? I mean, I certainly was a pretty good player, but my career outside of the court is what got me into that. And, over the course of time, I was an assistant coach, a head coach, player personnel director, a GM, a president of 3 different teams, worked for the NBA for 15 years in operations. So that part of it is, is why I'm in the Hall of Fame. And, it's like today is a benchmark, for me and my family. The Hall of Fame was the same.
Do you ever have a press conference where the question doesn't come up that you're the person that drafted Michael Jordan?
Well, thank goodness. I think that's probably what I'm known more for than anything else. And if you're going to be known for something, that's not a bad thing to be known by. About a month before the draft, Stu Inman, who was the GM of Portland at the time, that I was very friendly with, and I called him and I said, have you guys decided who you're going to take yet? And he said that if Bowie passed the physical, they would take him. So about a week before the draft, I called Stu and, did Bowie pass the physical? And he said yes. And I said, you still going to take him? And he said yes. So I knew that we were going to get Jordan before the draft, unless some crazy trade came up. But we were very, very fortunate. Had Portland won the flip, they would have taken Olajuwon. Houston would have taken Michael. So we were just very, very fortunate.
Had you been number 1, would you have taken Jordan?
I would have taken Olajuwon.
Okay.
If you think back to, everything is relative to the time.
Yeah.
Big guys were so much more important than small guys. So anybody that says they wouldn't have taken Olajuwon is not telling the truth. Because 30 teams would have taken him.
Do you like the game today? Do you like the NBA?
The game has changed. All the three-point shooting, the analytics tell you that if you make 32% of your threes, that's like making 50% of your twos. It's gone from, where are the low-post players? Embiid, maybe a couple other guys, that's it. So now it's more outside in than inside out.
to my personal preference, I'd like to see a little more variance, a little more diversity in play. My personal preference, but the fans seem to like it. You know, the NBA is doing as, better than they've ever done. And, look back, about 15 years ago, everybody was talking about there are no point guards in the NBA. Now, if you don't have a point guard, you're dead. Everybody almost has a really good point guard. And then 10 years or so, no shooters. Now shooters are everywhere because the AAU programs, the young programs started emphasizing those things. And, small guys can play now that couldn't play before because of the physicality of the game. And now you can't touch guys out front. Guys who can only shoot can play because they've spread the court, changed the game. So it's different. It really is. Look at Houston. They start a 6'5" center, and they're good. They have a good team. A 6'5" center. That's like crazy.
Was there ever a moment where it clicked and you knew that you wanted to make a life out of basketball, or did it just kind of happen?
I wish I were prescient enough as I was coming to the end of my career as a player due to injury that I had a plan, but not really. I was going to go to law school at the University of Washington. After my playing career was over. And I got a call in the summer. I was all set to go. And I got a call from Kevin Lockery, who was a coach of the New York Nets of the ABA. And I had played with him my first year in the NBA with Baltimore. And he offered me a job as an assistant coach. And I said, I'm going to go to law school. I don't think so. And a couple of days later, I said to my wife, Lockery offered me this job, and I think I'd like to take it. And she thought I was crazy. What are you talking about? We got a good life here, and, you're going to go to law school. What are you doing? But she agreed that if I really wanted to do it, we'd do it. So we came cross country and set up housekeeping on Long Island and won the championship the first year with Dr. J. And so then I've just been in it ever since.
For you evaluating players, whether we're going to draft them or building your team, is there one or two things that they had to have for you to say, yeah, I want that guy?
Number one, talent, physical talent. That's the first thing. Number two, you like to have people that, have a feel for basketball. In other words, they're smart players. Number three, you want somebody who's got heart. You want some toughness. But talent is number one. Good people too. You want people that are, you can depend on. But I think back to the time I was drafting. Virtually every mistake I made in drafting had to do with talent. I always took the talent guy. If he may not be the best guy in the world, we'll put him in our system and he will be. Doesn't work all the time.
Roger, you always hear stories about the dream team and how at the very beginning of it, guys really had to be kind of talked into doing it. How close was that, to not come into fruition? And what was it like at the beginning stages of putting that together?
Well, Russ Granick and Russ was a deputy commissioner of the NBA, were responsible for getting the players. So the only player who, I'm trying to think, everybody I called said they would do it.
Okay.
And I think I called most of them, and they all said they would do it. No one knew how big that would be, including the commissioner. Do you know that Russia and the U.S. voted against it, allowing pros to play? But that was unbelievable what it did for basketball around the world. You know, now in the NBA, you've got over 100 foreign kids. That's because of the 1992 Dream Team. The things I remember about it is Jordan was clearly the best player, clearly, but his personality did not affect the team from the standpoint of I'm Michael Jordan. I want to be the leading scorer. I want to do this. He was total team guy. Barkley was the leading scorer and rebounder on that team. And but Jordan in practices, oh my goodness, it was unbelievable.
Rod, you're a freshman coming to West Virginia. You practice against Jerry West. Your impression, did you think, oh my gosh, I can't play at this level? Or did you think, hey, I'm good enough, maybe I can be here someday?
Jerry was a great player. And he was a great player. He had unbelievable hand-eye coordination. He had long arms. He had it all. Great athlete. And I practiced against him a lot. He was a cut above. He really was. He was absolutely great. Jerry could, you know, in those days, guys didn't work out all summer like they do now. You know, the season's over, they take a couple of days off and they work out all summer. Jerry could not pick up a ball for 2 or 3 months, shoot for 30 minutes when he was in mid-season form. That's how good he was. You know, when you're talking about the great two guards of all time, you're talking about Jordan, West, Kobe Bryant, maybe Dwayne Wade. You know, put him in somewhere in that category of all time. That's how good he was.
What kind of pressures did you face coming in, you know, as the guy after Jerry?
You know, the pressure, it had nothing to do with the coaches, or it had to do with me. I put a lot of pressure on myself to, you know, to try to live up to be the next West, and nobody was going to do that. So I had a tough time with that for a while. And then I realized, you know, you got to try to be the best player you can be. You can't, you know, you're not going to be Jerry West. And then it was fine.
Not only were you the guy after, but you wore the same number. Did that enhance the
Yeah,
pressure?
now that is one if I had to do over, I probably wouldn't have done, to tell you the truth.
Did you wish you had a three-point play when you?
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Your two-hand jump shot.
Oh,
Beyond the arc. Yeah.
you know, I shot like a two-handed jump shot, and I had a lot of range, and I would love the three-point shot. Yes.